The last transmission from the colony ship Perseverance arrived at 0317 hours, Earth Standard Time on a Tuesday. No one was awake to hear it. By the time the duty officer at the United Earth Communications Array on Luna pulled herself from her chair, coffee still steaming in her hand, the signal had already been flagged, encrypted, rerouted, and stamped critical, a designation that had not been used in 11 years, not since the Vega incident that nobody in the government liked to talk about. She set the coffee down. She did not pick it up again. The message was 47 seconds long. It contained no words. It was simply a sound. The sound of 312 children screaming, followed by absolute silence, followed by a voice that did not belong to any human being. We have taken your young. Consider this a demonstration of your place in the order of things. Do not respond. Do not pursue. Any further colonization of the Kepler corridor will be met with the same. You are guests in our galaxy. Guests do not expand. Guests do not breed beyond their station. Be grateful we left you the adults. Then the signal died. In the 30 seconds that followed, nothing moved in the comm center except the soft blinking of console lights and the slow curl of steam rising from an abandoned coffee cup. Then the duty officer picked up the emergency line and called the Secretary General of the United Earth Council. The Secretary General listened to the full 47 seconds without saying a word. When it was over, she asked only one question. Who are they? The Veth Dominion, ma'am, we think. A pause that lasted exactly 4 seconds. Get me Admiral Chen, and wake up Dr. Vasquez, tell her to bring her team. Which team, ma'am? She has 3. The quiet one, the Secretary General said. The one that doesn't have a name. The Veth Dominion spanned 43 star systems. They had been spacefaring for 6,000 years. Their warships moved in formations that resembled living creatures, massive, organic-looking, and deeply unsettling to any species that had ever seen them emerge from a gravity well. Their soldiers wore armor grown from a biosynthetic compound that could stop a rail spike at point-blank range. Their command structure was ancient and rigid, built on a philosophy of dominance through overwhelming, unquestionable force. They had conquered 11 species. They had destroyed 4. They had watched humanity crawl out of its solar system 40 years ago, with the kind of amused contempt a lion gives a house cat that has wandered too far from the porch. Humanity was primitive, emotional, chaotic, soft. The Dominion had taken the children of Perseverance Colony to make a point, a clean, simple political point. Humans would retreat from the Kepler corridor. Humans would learn their place. And in 6 months, perhaps a year, the children would be returned. A little traumatized, a little broken, but alive. It was a technique the Dominion had used before. It worked. It always worked. What the Veth Dominion did not know, could not have known, was what humanity had been building in the 11 years since the Vega incident. What humanity had been preparing. What humanity had decided it would become, if this day ever came again. The galaxy was about to learn that there is no animal more dangerous than a species that has decided it is done being afraid. Admiral Yuki Chen was 61 years old, and had the posture of someone who had never once in her life allowed herself to slouch. She stood at the head of the war table in the UES Acheron, the most classified vessel in the human fleet, a ship whose existence was officially denied in 17 separate international treaties, and she looked at the faces of the 12 people assembled around her. Generals, scientists, intelligence chiefs. The best strategic minds humanity had ever produced. Nobody was crying. That was not because nobody wanted to. It was because they had all, individually and at different times in their careers, made a decision about what they were willing to become in order to protect the species they served. 312 children, said General Marcus Webb, commander of the UE Ground Forces. His voice was very level, his jaw was very tight. Ages 4 to 17, taken from Perseverance Colony approximately 9 hours ago. The colony's adult population was left unharmed. The colony itself was left unharmed. This was deliberate. A message, said Dr. Amara Vasquez. She was small, soft-spoken, and wore civilian clothes that somehow looked more authoritative than any uniform in the room. She had not been given a rank. She did not need one. They wanted us to know exactly what happened and exactly why. The Veth Dominion communicates through demonstration. This is their vocabulary. They expect us to understand it. We understand it, Admiral Chen said. The question is what we say back. They told us not to respond, someone said from the far end of the table. Chen looked at the speaker, Colonel Diane Park, UE Intelligence, with an expression that was not quite a smile. No. They told us not to respond the way they expect us to respond. They're waiting for a fleet. They've positioned 3 Dominion carrier groups along the Kepler corridor. If we send warships, they engage. They destroy us. They keep the children. And they've proven their point twice over. So we don't send warships, Vasquez said. No. Chen moved to the main display and pulled up a star map. The Kepler corridor, the Dominion positions, and one small pulsing marker on the far side of the corridor that nobody outside this room knew existed. We send them something else entirely. The room was quiet for a moment. The silence protocol, Webb said. It was not a question. The silence protocol, Chen confirmed. 11 years in development, never tested in the field, never used against a living civilization. She looked around the room. I want objections on the table now before we go any further. This is the moment to have them. Nobody spoke. Not because they had no objections, but because each of them had spent the last 11 years helping build the thing she was describing, and they had each, in their own way, made peace with what it was. All right. Chen deactivated the map. Dr. Vasquez, tell me the Veth are home. Vasquez opened her tablet. Dominion High Command is on Veth Prime. The Grand Conclave, all 43 senior Dominion commanders, convened 3 days ago for their standard strategic review. They're all in one place. She paused. They planned this abduction during that meeting. They're still there. They're waiting to hear what we do. Good, Chen said. They're going to find out. The thing that humanity had built over 11 years did not have an official name. Internally, within the sealed, air-gapped server networks of the project, it was referred to as Whisper. Outside that network, among the small circle of people who knew of its existence, it was called the Silence Protocol. Among the even smaller circle who understood what it actually did, what it was capable of, it had no name at all. Names implied a category. Whisper did not fit into any existing category. It was not a weapon exactly. It was not a computer program exactly. It was not a virus, not a bomb, not a fleet, not a diplomatic instrument. It was an idea, weaponized. Humanity, in its 40 years of interstellar expansion, had learned one thing above all others about the galaxy it was moving into. Every spacefaring civilization ran on information. Sensor networks, communication relays, command and control systems, navigation arrays. The more advanced the civilization, the more deeply integrated these systems were into every aspect of military, political, and social function. The Veth Dominion, 6,000 years old, was the most deeply integrated civilization humanity had ever encountered. Their entire empire ran on a network called the Veth Continuum, a real-time, faster-than-light data lattice connecting all 43 systems, every ship, every station, every ground installation. It was the nervous system of their civilization. Without it, their fleet coordination collapsed, their supply chains broke down, their command hierarchy went dark. Whisper had spent 11 years learning to speak Veth. It was ready to say something they would never forget. The Veth Dominion's Grand Conclave was meeting in the Hall of Unbroken Victory, a chamber that had stood for 4,000 years, its walls lined with the banners of every species the Dominion had defeated, absorbed, or erased. Grand Commander Sethrak Va sat at the head of the conclave table and felt, if not exactly pride, then something close to it. The operation had gone flawlessly. The human children were secured in Facility 7 on Dominion Station Kalos, comfortable, fed, entirely unharmed, and completely beyond human reach. The human fleet, such as it was, had not moved. The 3 carrier groups positioned along the Kepler corridor had reported no unusual activity. The humans were frozen. Good. That was the point. Let them sit with the weight of their helplessness. Let them exhaust themselves in political debate and military posturing. In 6 months, they would send diplomats. Seth Rakva would make them wait 3 months before agreeing to talk. Then he would set terms. The Kepler corridor would be formally ceded. Human colonization would be restricted to their original 17 systems. And the children, traumatized, changed, but breathing, would be returned as a gesture of Dominion magnanimity. It was clean. It was efficient. It was how the Dominion had always done things. Sethrakva was in the middle of this pleasant contemplation when the lights went out. Not dimmed, not flickered. Out. Complete darkness, absolute and total, throughout the entire hall of unbroken victory. His personal comm implant should have provided light. It didn't. It was silent. The backup power systems should have engaged within 0.3 seconds. They didn't. In the darkness, 43 of the most powerful military commanders in the galaxy sat perfectly still, because every one of them had spent their careers learning that stillness was survival when you didn't know what you were facing. Then the screens came back on. Not the screens that were supposed to come back on. Not the tactical displays, the star maps, the status readouts. Those remained dark. What came on were the personal display units. The small screens embedded in each commander's position at the table, the ones used for private communications during formal sessions. Every single one of them showed the same thing, a human face. Female. Middle-aged. Silver-streaked hair pulled back with military precision. Eyes that were very dark and very calm. Grand Commander Sethrakva. My name is Admiral Yuki Chen of the United Earth Space Forces. I'm going to speak and you're going to listen, because in approximately 45 seconds, you're going to realize that listening is the only option you have left. Please don't try to cut the feed, you can't. Please don't try to contact your fleet. You can't do that either. Sethrakva reached for his comm implant and found nothing. He looked at the commander to his left, who shook her head slightly. She had tried too. On the screens, Admiral Chen continued, I want to talk about your continuum. Specifically, I want to talk about the 17-hour maintenance window your engineering core runs every 42 days to recalibrate your FTL relay nodes. You use that window to push security updates to your encryption lattice. It's a very elegant system. We spent 9 years learning to read it. We spent 2 more years learning to write in it. She paused. We wrote something last night. The silence in the Hall of Unbroken Victory was a different kind of silence now. It was the silence of 43 brilliant military minds performing rapid calculations and arriving, one by one, at an answer they did not want to have arrived at. As of approximately 4 hours ago, every ship in the Veth Dominion fleet received a navigation update through standard continuum channels. The update came from a Dominion source node, specifically from Fleet Command Station Araneth, using your own authentication protocols. Your ships accepted it without question. Why would they question it? It came from inside the house. Another pause. The update contains a dormant package. It's sitting in your navigation cores right now, on every vessel larger than a scout craft, all 4,217 of them. It will remain dormant indefinitely, unless we activate it. If we activate it, every ship in your fleet will receive a new set of navigational instructions simultaneously, across all 43 systems, faster than any command you could send could countermand it. Those instructions will take your fleet to a destination of our choosing. Grand Commander Sethrakva was 6,000 years of military doctrine and tactical intelligence. He did not panic. He assessed. If what she was saying was true, if this was real, then the entire Veth fleet was already compromised, had been compromised for 4 hours, and nobody had noticed because the compromise had come through channels the fleet trusted completely. He thought about the maintenance window. He thought about the relay recalibration. He thought about the authentication protocols that had never, in 6,000 years, been breached. He looked at the human face on the screen and understood, with a cold clarity that he had never experienced before in his life, that she was not bluffing. We don't want your fleet, Admiral Chen said, as if she could read his thoughts. We don't want your territory. We don't want your resources or your technology or your submission. We want our children. All 312 of them, unharmed, returned to Perseverance Colony within 72 hours. She leaned slightly forward. Return our children, and this package disappears. Every copy, every trace. We will never speak of this conversation. The Kepler corridor remains open for human colonization, and we will establish a formal diplomatic channel so that future disagreements are handled differently. This is our complete list of demands, we have no others. A final pause. When she spoke again, her voice was very quiet. Or don't return them. and find out where we send your fleet." The screens went dark. In the Hall of Unbroken Victory, surrounded by the banners of 11 conquered species, 43 Dominion commanders sat in silence for a very long time. Then, Grand Commander Sethrakva said very quietly to no one in particular, "Find me a communication channel to the humans. Any channel. Find one that still works." The Dominion found a channel. It took them 6 hours. They had to use a commercial relay, a civilian trade network node that Whisper had left deliberately untouched, like a phone booth left standing in a city where every other line of communication had been cut. The symbolism was not lost on Admiral Chen when the call came through. "They used the merchant relay," Colonel Park said, almost smiling. "Of course they did," Chen said. "It's the only thing left that works. Put them through." Sethrakva's face appeared on the Acheron's main display. He was composed. He was Dominion. But Chen had spent 3 decades reading the faces of people who were trying very hard not to show what they were actually feeling, and she could read him clearly. He was afraid. Not of her exactly. Not of humanity exactly. He was afraid of the thing he didn't understand. The unknown variable. The species that had done something no species had ever done, and done it so quietly, so invisibly, that his civilization hadn't felt a thing until the moment she chose to tell them. That was the real blow, not the capability, the patience. "Admiral Chen," he said. His translator rendered his voice in clean, flat human English. "I am authorized to discuss the terms you proposed." "There's nothing to discuss," Chen said pleasantly. "The terms are the terms. I described them completely. Do you accept them or not?" A pause. "I have questions about the verification process." "Reasonable. We'll provide full remote verification access to our systems once the children are confirmed safe on Perseverance Colony. You'll be able to confirm the package removal yourself. We want you to be able to confirm it. We want this to be the beginning of trust, not the end of it." Another pause, longer this time. "You said you want a diplomatic channel." "We do. We've always wanted one. You didn't offer." "We did not consider you worth the offer." "I know," Chen said. "We're aware of exactly how you've categorized us. This conversation is partly about updating that categorization." Sethrakva looked at her for a long moment. He had the eyes of something very old, 6,000 years of institutional memory looking out through one set of pupils. And what Chen saw in them was not hatred exactly. It was something more complicated. Something like the feeling of standing at the edge of a very deep well and looking down and not being able to see the bottom. "What are you?" he asked. It seemed to be a genuine question. Chen considered it. "We're human beings," she said. "We're very young, and we're very frightened most of the time, and we make terrible decisions at least as often as we make good ones. But we love our children with a completeness that doesn't leave room for anything else, and anyone who touches them finds out very quickly what's underneath all that fear." She let that sit for a moment. "The 72 hours started when I ended our first conversation. You have 66 hours remaining. I'd encourage you to use them efficiently." She cut the feed. The children arrived at Perseverance Colony in 61 hours, all 312 of them, in 2 Dominion transport vessels escorted by a single Dominion frigate that peeled away and departed the moment the transports broke atmosphere. No ceremony, no speech, no attempt at face-saving diplomatic framing. The transports landed in the colony's main agricultural field because it was the largest clear space available, and the colony had not been designed to receive ships of that size. The cargo ramps lowered, and the children walked out into the afternoon sunlight of a planet that smelled like wheat and soil and home, and they stood there blinking in the light until the adults ran to them. The sound that went up from that field was not something that translated cleanly into any language the Veth Dominion possessed. On the UES Acheron, Admiral Chen watched the reunion on satellite feed and said nothing for a very long time. Beside her, Dr. Vasquez was looking at the same image. "Do we hold to the agreement?" Vasquez asked quietly. "The package removal?" "Every copy, every trace, exactly as promised." Chen didn't look away from the screen. "We said what we meant. We meant what we said. That's how trust gets built." "Even with the Dominion?" "Especially with the Dominion." Chen finally looked away. "They're going to spend the next decade trying to figure out how we did it. They're going to tear their continuum apart looking for other packages. They're not going to find any because there aren't any, but the search itself will occupy them. And while they're occupied, we'll be establishing a diplomatic presence, opening trade channels, building relationships with the 11 species they've conquered. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. You planned further than the children. We planned for the children first, Chen said firmly. Everything after that is just mathematics. Consequence, action, and reaction. She glanced at the star map on the secondary display. The Dominion thinks of power as a fixed quantity, something you accumulate and hold. We think of it differently. How do we think of it? As infrastructure. You build it and then you build more on top of it and it grows. They've been holding what they have for 6,000 years. We've been building for 40. She turned back to the satellite feed where the reunion in the wheat field was still ongoing, parents holding children who would carry this day with them for the rest of their lives. We're just getting started. The story spread the way all true things spread, first as rumor, then as whisper, then as fact, that nobody quite wanted to say out loud because saying it out loud made it more real than some civilizations were prepared for it to be. Humanity had walked into the nervous system of the most powerful military empire in the explored galaxy and left a note. And the empire had read the note and blinked and given back what it had taken, because the alternative was a darkness it could not see the edges of. The Keth Consortium, a loose federation of 7 species along the galaxy's inner arm, heard the story from a Dominion trade envoy who had had too much of something that functioned like alcohol at a diplomatic function on Keth Station. The envoy had not intended to tell the story, but it came out of them the way things come out when the weight of knowing becomes heavier than the instinct to be quiet. The consortium's intelligence council spent 3 months verifying what they had heard. They sent probes into Dominion space. They interviewed Dominion merchant captains who had noticed their navigation systems behaving oddly for about 4 hours on a certain Tuesday before snapping back to normal. They pulled sensor logs from the relay nodes along the Kepler corridor. What they found confirmed everything. They sent a diplomatic mission to Earth. It was the consortium's first direct contact with humanity. The mission's lead envoy, a tall, many-limbed being called HFY, who communicated partly in subsonic vibration and partly in careful, precise English learned specifically for this meeting, arrived at the United Earth Council chamber in Geneva and spent 40 minutes in formal greetings before getting to the reason she had come. "We want to understand you," HFY said through her translation device. "What you did, how you did it. More importantly, why you stopped where you stopped. You had their fleet. You could have sent it anywhere. You could have used it to ensure your own dominance over the corridor. Over multiple corridors, you chose not to. We want to understand why." The Secretary General of the United Earth Council, a different person now than the one who had taken that call 3 years earlier, though cut from the same cloth, thought about the question for a moment before answering. "Because we didn't want dominance," she said. "We wanted our children back. Those are not mutually exclusive outcomes." "No, they're not. But the moment you use a thing like that for personal gain rather than protection, you've become something different. Something we don't want to be." HFY was quiet for a moment. The subsonic vibration that came from her changed frequency in a way that the Council's xenolinguistic AI identified as something between contemplation and discomfort. "You built a weapon powerful enough to end the Dominion as a functioning empire," HFY said slowly. "And you used it only to retrieve 312 children. And then you dismantled it." "We didn't dismantle it," the Secretary General said. She said it very gently. "We removed it from the Dominion systems. The capability still exists. It will always exist. That's the point." Another silence, longer than the first. "You want the galaxy to know you could," HFY said, "without ever having to do it again. We want the galaxy to know that we could, and that we chose not to, and that we would prefer to be friends with everyone in it if at all possible. But yes, we need them to know we could." The Secretary General folded her hands on the table. "The best weapons are the ones you never have to fire a second time." The Veth Dominion did not collapse. It did not fall apart or fracture or descend into civil war. It was too old and too strong and too deeply structured for that. But it changed. Slowly, in the way that very old things change, which is to say with great resistance and great reluctance and an almost physical pain. A formal diplomatic channel was established between the Dominion and Earth as agreed. Trade negotiations began within a year. Dominion forces withdrew from 2 of the 11 conquered species' homeworlds, not because of any treaty obligation, but because the math had shifted. Holding 11 civilizations by force was enormously expensive. It had always been expensive. The Dominion had afforded it because no one had ever made the cost feel real. Humanity had made it feel real. The children of Perseverance Colony grew up. They went to schools and fell in love and had careers and children of their own. Most of them, when asked about what had happened to them in those 61 hours aboard a Dominion transport, said approximately the same thing, that they had been frightened, and then confused, and then, when the ramp lowered and they smelled the wheat field and heard voices they recognized, flooded with a feeling for which they did not yet have words. One of them, a girl who had been 7 years old when she was taken and who grew up to be a xenodiplomat of considerable distinction, was asked, late in her career, what she thought about what humanity had done to retrieve her. She thought about it for a long time before she answered. "We didn't send an army," she said finally. "My mother told me that when I was old enough to understand it. She said that when they took us, humanity looked at the problem the way they look at all problems. Practically. Without ego. Without the need to be seen doing something, they asked, what do we actually need? We need the children back, safe, with the least possible loss of life and the greatest possible chance of a lasting peace. And then they built the thing that got exactly that result, and no more." She was quiet for a moment. "The Dominion expected rage," she said. "They knew how to handle rage. They've been handling rage for 6,000 years. What they got instead was patience and precision, and a people who had decided quietly, a long time ago, that if this moment ever came, they were going to be ready for it." She shook her head slowly. "That's what terrified them. Not the weapon. The patience behind the weapon. The willingness to wait 11 years for something you might never need to use." "Is that what humanity is?" the interviewer asked. "Patient?" The diplomat smiled. It was a complicated smile, shaped by 60 years of living in a galaxy that was still, after everything, learning what humanity was. "Humanity is a species that will wait as long as it has to," she said, "and love as hard as it can, and build as quietly as it must. And when something we love is threatened, when something irreplaceable is taken from us," she paused, "we don't get angry, we get to work, and we don't stop until the work is done." Somewhere in the galaxy, on 43 worlds, in the nervous system of an ancient and powerful civilization, there was no longer any trace of what had once been there, but the memory remained. The memory always remained. And in the wheat fields of Perseverance Colony, in the long golden light of a late afternoon, 312 people who had once been children and were now grown, walked through the grain with their own children beside them, and the planet smelled like soil and sunlight, and something that had no name in any alien language but that every human being in the galaxy knew by feel. It smelled like home, and somewhere out in the dark between the stars the galaxy had learned something it would not soon forget. Do not take what humans love, because humanity does not send armies. Humanity sends something worse.